Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Med School Minutes podcast, where we discuss what it takes to attend and successfully complete a medical program. This show is brought to you by St. James School of Medicine. Here is your host, Kaushik Gua.
Welcome to another episode of Med School Minutes. Today we want to talk a little bit about a day in the life of a student. We got a lot of questions on what's it like, how do students study, how is it possible to finish MD in an accelerated program. So today we want to garner some insights into how does an individual go about cracking the code of basic sciences. And for that, we have a very special guest. Her name is Anazuo. She's a current MD4 student. She's on the dean's list. She's one of our best tutors. And she has given back so much to the general St. James diaspora by helping as many students as she can. So without further ado, let's welcome Anazuo. Thank you so much for making the time. You are a current MD4 student, and I know you're very, very busy with all the lectures and all of that we have going on, but we really, really appreciate you making time. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey?
Okay. Thank you for inviting me on. I'm really glad to be here. So my name is Anazuo Ohieku-Ajanaku. I'm from Nigeria, currently in MD4, like you mentioned. So I have a bachelor's degree in public health and a master's degree in public health as well. I have 4 siblings. I'm the oldest one. My journey to medicine started like over 20 years ago now because when I had my little sister, she was really sick while we were young. So she was always in hospital. I was always going to the hospital with my mom because she couldn't leave me at home. So I've really always been in that. And I really love being in the hospital. Unlike many children, everyone is scared of being there. But I, for some reason, just really likes to be there. So this is always something that I've known I wanted to do. It has never changed for me. So finally doing it now, over 20 years later. So it's never too late.
Right. Better late than never. So tell me a little more about your experience. So this has obviously been an aspiration for, I'm guessing, better part of more than half of your life. And now that you're in the thick of things, have you been disappointed in any way? Have you been surprised in any way? Have you been pleasantly surprised in any way with the material, with the content, now that you're actually going through the rigors? Is it too hard, not too hard, much easier than you? Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, that's a really great question because before I came, I was really worried, will I be able to, will I be able to understand the material? Will it stick? Will I do really well on my exams, on my tests? I was really worried and I was like, the first semester is my test. If I'm not able to manage, I'll just maybe that means it's not for me, But surprisingly, I found it, I won't say easy, but easier than I expected because I'm going through it and I'm not having as much or as many struggles, especially with the material as I thought I would. It's coming easy to me. I'm understanding what's going on. I think a part of it is because I love, and this is what I wanted to do. So I'm happy to be there. I'm happy to dive deep. I'm happy to, have my tests. I'm happy to study. So I think that plays a very huge part in my experience so far, which has been good. So
Excellent. So that means it almost sounds like you're alluding to the fact that your temperament on how you're approaching things really matters. Because we do get this a lot. Oh, I don't want to study too much. The studying hours are too long. But as you mentioned, you seem to be very happy to put in the hours and happy to take the tests, etc., etc. So it seems like the temperament is the main focus. And obviously you have a great temperament. But one thing I do want to ask you is that you have a master's in public health, and master's in public health, it's not a very, it's more of an it prepares you for the administrative role and the administration of larger public health programs in hospitals and governments. It's not learning about histology. It's not about learning about various pathologies. It's not very technical at all. So coming from a master's with in public health, do you think that gave you any sort of edge?
I wouldn't say so because, like you mentioned, it's very much administrative. My master's was in health policy, so it's really paperwork, law, ethics. I did take a little bit biostats and epidemiology because that's really a big part of public health. So that helped me in MB3 when I had to take epidemiology and biostatistics. But I wouldn't really say it really prepares you much because it's very different. I didn't learn any anatomy, any physiology. Like it's all pretty brand new to me. So it's yeah, no experience in that. Yeah.
All right. And obviously you're doing very, very well. You are on the dean's list. And as you mentioned, the concepts seem to be coming very easily or relatively easily to you, much easier than you had expected. And you're not just, studying for yourself, but from what I hear, you're also giving back to the best of your abilities at this point. And obviously, you're going to get many, many more opportunities to do that moving forward. And as you finish your MD and become a full fledged doctor. But can you tell us what you're doing now to help as many students as you can?
Okay, so right now I'm actually a tutor, and mainly
Okay.
I'm tutoring for physiology and epidemiology and biostatistics this semester. Last semester, I was more focused on histology and biochemistry and genetics. So that's really what I'm doing now in terms of giving back because I think that I want to help people succeed. I want to see them do well. And I really I've been tutoring since I was in high school, so it's like it's not new to me, and it
Right.
really gives me joy seeing other people do well because it's not nice to see people around you struggle when you know
Right.
you understand the concept. So why not help others? Because this is an accelerated program. We go through things really quickly. So some people just need like an extra one-on-one time, just to explain certain things that may be difficult because making it as simple as it can be is really the key because that's how I understand things. The simpler it's explained, the easier and quicker it is for me to now, move to the more complex stuff. So tutoring right now is yeah, I'm doing that and I really enjoy it. In fact, after this, our podcast session right now, I have a session after. So it's something that I enjoy doing and it also helps me, go back to those concepts that I have already done. So I have to go back review because before the students have the meetings with me, I always ask them what topics they want to go over so that I can go do my own review and learn more. And I find that that really helps me. There were some concepts in biochemistry that weren't my strongest, but when I had to teach someone else, it forced me to go back and really understand those things. And that was very important to me.
That's excellent. So, would if and honestly, I'm going to be very frank with you. A lot of students are like, I really don't have time for that. I can't tutor. What would your response be to some of your colleagues in school who are saying that, oh, I really don't have time to tutor? What would your response to that be?
My response would be that tutoring is actually studying because everything we learn from MB1 to MB4 is going to come back. So you really need to revise those things. Most of the time, we're focusing on the current semester subjects that we're learning while forgetting that the things we did last semester, the semester before, we still need to know those things. So whenever I have sessions, but I just see it as this is time for me now to go back and kind of review those sessions. So when comes MD5, when I'm taking comprehensive exams, I will already have, studied those portions and I wouldn't have to go back again for, another time, maybe just a quick review. So really it's helping yourself and helping the other person. It goes both ways, I think. So I would really suggest or like encourage people to do it because it's really helpful.
Okay. So, is there any kind of student who you think would not make a good tutor?
Um, Maybe someone who isn't able to take I wouldn't say take correction, but like, when you're tutoring someone, you don't want to act like you know everything. You need to be a little bit humble and then you need to be
Hmm.
patient as well because sometimes you might have to explain something in different ways and, multiple times before they understand. And you don't want to make anybody feel like, feel less of themselves. So you really need to be humble. You need to be patient. I think that's two very important things. So if you aren't able to do that, then maybe tutoring isn't for you.
I see. And generally speaking, do you think, as I mentioned, a lot of students are talking about time constraints. Can you tell me a little bit about how you're managing your schedule? Because obviously you're on the dean's list, you're doing very well, you're still making time for other students. But at the same time, you seem to be in very good control of your schedule. Are there any tips or tricks that you would recommend in order to manage schedules? How do you do it, really? That's the question. After 8 hours of classes, doing tutoring, and still acing your exams.
Mhm. So I would say try to make as much, and I've been saying this since MD1, try to make as much as you can out of the class times, because yeah, we're in class almost 8 hours almost every day. So you have 2 hours per lecture. So you really want to make sure you're assimilating the information that's being given to you. And that's how I learn. I'm learning as in actively while I'm there. And then after school, I can focus myself on questions and then not like going back to the slides. Because going back to the slides after class is really time consuming. I've personally never been able to do that. So trying to
Okay.
make the most of being in class and then afterwards do the questions. If there are concepts I see myself constantly getting wrong or not understanding, then I go, watch a few videos, read a few books. And, that's just how I manage my time, because there's really no time, but you really need to make the most of the little time that you have. And also rest, sleep. Like I sleep, I don't, you know, lose sleep as much as people would think, because I think it's very important for the memory. Like that's probably another secret I have. Make sure you sleep, because not
Okay.
sleeping will make you forget. I sleep a lot and it keeps my memory intact, I think.
That's awesome. So unpack that statement about making the most of class a little bit more. Um, how do you make the most of an 8 hour class?
Well, just trying to, if you're following along with the slides or you're trying to listen to what the professor is saying, just try to understand at least the main thing that you're talking about. You don't have to remember every single point, because I think the mistake people make is that whenever the teachers tell you, you're learning 80% of your learning is in class, they feel like you need to know 80%. But the truth is, after most lectures, I don't like when the questions, because a lot of the times the professors will have questions after class, and half of the time I can't really answer the questions in that moment. So like it's not like you
Okay.
have to know what you just learned, but try to at least assimilate some things so that when you go back you don't, because to me reading a slide that someone else made when they haven't explained it to you is very time consuming, unless you won't read their slides eventually.
Hmm.
But that's what I mean by making the most of the time you have, because it's not like I'm sitting in class and I'm like, after the lecture, I know everything. I'm answering the questions. The opposite. I'm always like, what's happening right now? But then I go back, and while I'm doing my own personal study, what I've listened to and what I've learned, it comes back and I'm like, okay, now this makes sense. I take it at my own pace. So
I see.
mhm.
And do you do any preparation before attending the classes?
Sometimes, but not often, because like I try to, but not as much. But that really helps,
Okay.
especially in classes where it's things like biochemistry and you're learning pathways. I have suggested to many people to at least watch a 10 to 15 minute video before class. That's what I did in biochemistry. That's probably the one class, and maybe pharmacology as well, because now I'm taking pharmacology, and it's something you kind of have to have an idea of some of the drugs that are going to be mentioned and a little bit about how they work. So watching videos before class, at least to get your mind ready to hear what you're going to hear, especially if it's something you have no idea about, because like I said, like 2 hour lecture to go over a whole something that's probably taking people in other schools maybe 2, 3 days to go over. So you need to really make sure you have an idea before you go to class. Don't go to class completely blank, especially when you notice that you're having a hard time following. Then I know it's no time, but there are short 10, 15 minute videos, just, yeah.
Okay. And what about during class when you're assimilating all this information? What do you mean by assimilation?
Well, sometimes when you're listening to the professors, try to understand what are they actually saying. And if you have questions, you can ask or ask during office hours. Lots of people don't really use the opportunity of going to meet the teachers after. So like if you're not understanding something, you're trying your best, you can ask them after. But what I'm saying by
Yeah.
assimilate is I'm trying to understand what is the main point of what they're trying to say. So when we're learning something like, let's say glycolysis, for instance, and she's trying to
Mhm.
tell you all the enzymes and how they're working with each other, the main points of that class is really to know your regulatory enzymes and when they are deficient. So when someone has a deficiency in a certain enzyme, how will they manifest? What signs will they show? And what how will they present? So things like that. You need to know what's the main point of this class. Try to understand that, and it will help you.
Okay. And while in class, do you actually take notes, or are you just entirely paying attention to the teacher?
So I take notes, but um trying to understand first, then I'll take in notes. Just, sometimes highlight some key points, but taking notes if they're explaining something and you are like not sure. So just trying to write down what they're saying so you go back and read it
Mm,
yourself. Because sometimes you can understand and you're like, okay, I'll remember this. But you need to put pointers next to the notes so you know, okay, this is how I understood it in this moment. Because sometimes, you
okay.
learn something and then when you go back, you're like, wait, what does this mean? You knew it before, but you need
Hmm.
to,
Right.
okay, I understood it in XYZ way. And then that will
Okay.
help you for your reviewing.
So you're basically saying that you're not sitting there while the professor's teaching, you're not taking feverish notes. You're really actively listening and then really jotting down the main issues. And then when the class is over, essentially you go back that evening and then you kind of review those topics that you thought were noteworthy and are essentially doing a deeper dive into those particular topics. Is that an accurate representation?
Yes, but at the same time, it's a little bit different for each class. I'm thinking now about what I'm doing now. What I'm doing now, that is what I'm doing now. But in MD1, when I took histology, because the professor was explaining it in a very simple way. So I was trying to write down everything he said because annotating or transcribing what he was saying was really helpful for me. And then something like microbiology, where there's a lot of information, you also want to make sure you're capturing lots of those bacteria and viruses and the drugs. So it depends on the class. Things like that, yes, I'm taking feverish notes, but the other things like physiology, for instance, you really want to understand how it works. Taking notes might not help as much. You really want to understand how it works. But when it's a class where it's information you're getting given and you're being given and there are no, it might not be on the slide or it's something that someone has asked a question and something comes up, you do want to take note of those important things if you can. It just depends on the class, really. It's
Okay.
yeah.
So if I heard you right, it almost sounds like you had a particular strategy to approach classes in MD1 versus in MD4. Your strategy is different.
Yeah.
And so your strategy went for taking lots of notes in the beginning classes to more active listening at MD4. Is
Yes.
that right?
Mhm.
How did you decide that your strategy needed to change?
How did I decide? Well, MD4 just started. So I just decided because now I know more. I think by MD4 you
Hmm.
know a lot more. Like the person I was in the beginning of MD1 is totally different person now. Like I know more, so I don't really have to take as many notes of every single thing because you
Ah,
know more. So you can, just focus on paying attention, refreshing your memory. Because now learning pathology, we're learning a lot of the genetic disorders, which we already learned in MD1. So it's more like a refresher, and I don't have to, you know, be writing down everything because these are things that you already kind of know, which I like. Like a lot of the classes we always talked about clinical correlates. So now with pathology, they are almost like a revision to those diseases that you've already learned about. So
nice. And that's very interesting because, I mean, I'm going to be very honest. A lot of students, when they come into an accelerated program like ours, are usually um, struggling. And not usually, but a lot of them are struggling. And I think the things that you pointed out are very, very mindful and deliberate in the sense that those strategies seem like generic enough that they will help everybody, but surprisingly, not everybody does that. And again, I've dealt with a lot of students. A lot of students will probably come to class and do something that is completely irrelevant to the class that they're sitting in for. So, for example, if they're doing a histology class, they might be doing a whole different subject, or they're not focusing on the chapter. Do you think that that's advisable at all?
Honestly, I don't know because I don't really do that, but I do see people doing that. And I think
Yeah.
it's the fear that you don't have enough time. Maybe the one time I would do that is, let's say I have a quiz that day and I'm in another class and you feel like you're not fully ready and you might
Right.
want to like be looking at your other class notes for the quiz you have after this class. So I see why you could do that, but I think it's the fear of falling behind in another class and you're like, you just have to do what you have, I guess. But I wouldn't advise it. I
Right.
rarely do that unless I have a test and I feel unprepared for. But yeah.
Wow, if there was any irony, I think that is it. That you have the fear of falling behind. As a result, you're not paying attention in class, and it, and then you really fall behind in that particular class. That's a very interesting
Yeah.
take on things. So, going back to tutoring, how much time do you allocate to tutoring?
So it depends. I usually have my hours open from 5 to 7 on most days, except Sunday.
Hmm.
I don't have any sessions on Sunday, but I usually have it 5 to 7 on most days, and except the days where I have a quiz the next day. So I only block out the days where I have a quiz the next day, or maybe I just want that like that evening off. But on average, let's say 2 hours a week. It's not really as much as it seems, but recently this semester I've had more sessions booked. I think I've already done 11 in 3 weeks. So 11 hours in 3 weeks is about almost 4 hours a week, which seems like a lot, but it's really not because it's like one or two a day and then you're done. So
Okay.
generally, I would allocate, maybe if I do 8 hours, 8 hours is quite a lot. Let me say 4 hours a week is probably going to be my max. So that's what I
All
would
right.
allocate.
All right. And is there typically any compensation with tutoring associated with tutoring?
Yeah. So for each session, which should last 45 minutes to an hour, we get $15 off tuition. Yeah. So per hour,
Okay.
$15. Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, that's amazing. So this is not just free, you actually benefit a little bit by reducing your tuition burden. It's almost like a scholarship, if you will. But again, I mean, as I mentioned, a lot of students just don't want to do tutoring because they keep saying that, no, I don't have the time, etc., etc. But you're saying that tutoring has really, really benefited you to assimilate or consolidate some of the concepts that you might have had a hard time with. Now, have you had any regrets doing all this tutoring?
No, not at all. Not, no. And
All
it's
right. Well,
giving me the opportunity to get to know some of these students a little bit better because you're in your class most of the time. You don't really get to know people in other MD levels. So it's giving
I
me the
gotcha.
opportunity to, yeah, get to know some other people, which is good.
Okay. So the other thing that a lot of students really want to know, and they always talk about, is work life balance or study life balance in your case. Can you touch upon that a little bit and tell me, number one, what that really means to you? And number two, how are you doing in achieving a study life balance?
Well, I don't go out much, but my life balance is that I like to sleep. So when I'm not, yeah. So if I'm sleeping, yeah, I need to sleep, and I don't know how I do it. Let me think. Yeah, okay. The only time where I would come back from school and probably be like, maybe not pull an all-nighter, but stay up even when my body is telling me I need to sleep is a day, 2 days before my test. Normally, I sleep at least 7 6 7 hours every night,
That's
but
not a whole lot of sleep, by the way.
it's
You made it
not.
sound like you're sleeping
It's.
48
I
hours
mean,
a
we're meant. Trust me, some people are sleeping like 3 hours. I don't know. It
day.
seems like
Okay.
I don't know. I actually don't know how many hours I sleep, but I do sleep a lot. I don't wake up like groggy or tired.
Uh-huh.
If I'm feeling sleepy, I will go and lay down. But I think that you just need to make a timetable. I have a timetable. Like I will write down each day. because I really can't do
Mhm.
multiple things in a day. I focus one day, I'm gonna focus on this subject or this course. Tomorrow I'm going to do this. I first of all will put down all my exam dates, and then I will organize it in such a way that when the exam date is coming up, then I will start to focus on those lectures. But then in between, I'm trying to catch up on the other things that I have to do so that I don't wait to the very last minute and then it's like everything's, you know, I don't know, piled up. So I always make a schedule. I make a schedule for everything, like everything to the hour, 6 to 7, I'm going to do this, 7 to 8, I'm going to do this, just to keep myself on track so that I can, you know, try to be on time.
So it seems like there's a lot of self-discipline. And how do you enforce that with yourself?
I just tell myself that, this is what you wanted to do, like, and you just have to make it. You have to make it out.
Right,
You have
right.
to, yeah. So when you think about how much you really want to do something, you just want to keep going and you want to be done as soon as you can. So
Yeah.
just focus on the goal. Focus on the goal. Hmm.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you say that because I deal with a lot of students. I deal with a lot of practicing physicians. I also deal with a lot of alumni as well, and I also deal with some students who aren't successful. And I think I've always said this, that it seems like um, intelligence is what it is. I mean, and you do need obviously some basic intelligence, but you don't need to be a Mensa member or something like that to do well at anything, not just medicine, but at anything. But it seems like most people who aren't successful as students are students who really haven't prioritized achieving their goals. And I think that's exactly what you're saying, that students who are on the island and are thinking that, you know what, I'm going to take a nap when I don't necessarily, need to, or I'm going to do everything else because this particular chapter is too hard and I want to avoid it. But it seems like you definitely have that self discipline, that you're forcing yourself to go through it just because you have your eyes on the prize, so to speak, which
Hmm.
is obviously becoming a licensed physician.
Hmm.
And I think what you're saying really echoes my observation, which is the only students who aren't successful are students who aren't prioritizing their goals and their careers.
You know,
And pardon?
I'm glad there's something you mentioned, and I'm glad you did because it's reminded me of something you said. Sometimes some people would want to take a nap when they don't want to face, like, be like, okay, this chapter is too hard. I want to,
Yeah.
just not focus on that right now. And I think a big part of why people don't do well is fear and feeling like they're not good enough. Because I've heard a lot of things
Okay.
from people like talking about, maybe I'll take comp like 3 times, or, a lot of people don't think they will pass the first time, which I feel like you shouldn't be saying that to yourself. Even from MD1, people were already to the point where, yeah, they know they won't pass it the first time. You can't say that to yourself. And I think that that's something that I've never thought. I've never thought that,
Hmm.
I'm not good enough to do this. I mean, people have done it, so you can do it too. Is the fear. Like sometimes I feel scared too, but I have to push myself because the fear is going to be there, but I'm the one that's going to face the consequences of, you know, succumbing to
Right.
that. So it's the fear. I know a lot of people are really scared and they don't believe in themselves. That's really what it boils down to the
Right. So I want to talk to you about something. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this term, but have you heard of the term manifestation?
Yes.
It's almost like if you're planning to take the exam multiple times, you're manifesting failure and not manifesting success, whereas you, on the other hand, are manifesting success. And I think that that's a very, very big difference. Constantly telling yourself, I'm not good enough, you know what, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and you end up not being good enough. Whereas somebody like you're coming in guns a blazing, saying, you know what, I'm here for a job, I'm going to get it done, I will uh you know relax and I will take it easy when I achieve my goals. And I think generally speaking, that is a very, very Very good advice. And I think in your tutoring sessions, you should really talk about that, about students and how to study, because I sometimes feel that a lot of people, given the volume that you have to go through, get overwhelmed, and they're like, you know what, I'm not even going to do that. I'm going to go take a nap, or you know what, I'm just going to go out and have a drink with my friends, and maybe things will get better the next day. But if you're not chipping away at it, things aren't getting better, they're probably getting worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's very, very interesting. When you do tutor the students, do you ever really talk about study techniques, and not just the actual material at hand?
Yeah, I also give them links. I try to tell them what worked for me and, try to help them out in the best way that I can. But,
Okay.
and I also try to give them pep talks too, because sometimes they do feel overwhelmed. I let them know you don't really have to be, shouting the answers out in class. Like I never did that because I mean now I can because I know more, but in the very
Right.
beginning, um, yeah, it was all new. So you're just trying to, learn as much as you can. Don't feel, discouraged. Don't feel like you can't do it, because I kind of had a little bit of, no, I won't say self-doubt, but coming into a school and half of your classmates are either nurses or paramedics or physician assistants, like, and then I have no
Mhm.
medical experience or anything of that sort. So it almost got to me, but after the first test I did really well and I was like, oh, okay, so I can do this. But even if you don't do well in the first one, you don't give up. Don't feel less than, because you're here for a reason, and you just have to keep going. But
All right. In your um the way you look, in your worldview, do you really think that there are, I should caveat my question by saying most people who go to medical school have a certain degree of motivation, typically a motivation that is greater than the average person. That's why they're in med school to begin with. Now, in your worldview, do you think that there might be some people who shouldn't be there at all because they don't have the right temperament, they don't want to, etc., etc.? And be honest with your answer.
I mean, yeah, of course, there are a few people who, well, for whatever reasons, I'm not sure what the motivation is, because I feel like for you to come here, a lot of us have, we have degrees from before,
Mhm.
or, a few years out of college. So to me, I feel like everyone brought themselves here, but at the same time, you don't really see the motivation in some people. It feels like someone forced them
Mm,
to be there, which I sometimes find very difficult to understand. But yeah,
I
I
see.
mean, it's you really can't tell anyone, that where they should be or where they can't be. But at the
Right.
same time, the system will, end up taking out those who aren't probably able to do it, or aren't motivated enough, because you really need a lot of motivation, not just for med school. After you finish, you still have to do residency, which is its own you know beast
Right.
yeah, so it's just how it is.
And I will let you know that residency is really just the beginning, because once you become board certified, that board exam, if you think USMLE step 1 and step 2 or the NBME exams are hard, the board exams are much, much harder. It's
Wow.
much and these are things that you have to take. These exams are exams that you have to take practically lifelong. As long as you're going to be practicing, you'll be taking exams. So fortunately or unfortunately, I think medicine requires you to be a good test taker. The good news is that med school, with the number of exams that you are taking, you will become a good test taker by the end of it. So board exams, the content is a lot more dense than what you will ever see in step 1 or step 2. But at the same time, by that time, you're so honed and so polished that the exams are relatively feel easier. But content wise, there aren't.
Hmm. Yeah,
Speaking of, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I agree with that. That's so funny, because I was thinking about it a few days ago about how I have maybe 4 or 5 classes. Each class has 4 quizzes, 2 exams, and it's like when you calculate it, it's like I have 20 something tests in 4 months, and it feels normal now, but if you think about it, it's actually not normal. Like you said, maybe being in med school will force you to be a good test taker. My test anxiety has drastically gone down because how many times am I going to be anxious before I go in for a test? I'm taking this so much that I'm just like, it's 150 questions. Okay, whatever. I'm just going to go in, sit down, do my questions. It's actually, yeah, that's probably the biggest shocker for me. The amount of tests and the amount of questions you're just going to do. Oh my goodness. And
Okay. So tell me this, Anazu. Did you at any point did you have test taking anxiety?
yeah, I still do to an
Okay.
extent. A little bit, because you want to do the best. For me, it's because I want to do really well. So I'm like, I have to put my first best foot forward. Am I going to remember everything that I've studied? So that's where and I think I also have I won't say I push myself. I try to push myself a bit too much. I put so much pressure on myself sometimes. So for me now, it's not just about passing. It's about like I want to get an A in my classes. So that's why I'm I'm anxious. Yeah,
Okay.
but
But I think that that's a good kind of anxiety that oh my god, these questions, I'm looking at these, um I don't know that I will get a perfect score, but I might get, like a B but not an A, but that's any day better. But that's a different sort of anxiety in to the point where, like, and this is post pandemic, to be very candid with you, exam taking anxiety is seems to be an issue, well, not just with St. James students, but just students across the board. And I know a lot of universities, and I go to a lot of conferences, everybody talks about this, that especially post pandemic, the management of anxiety, and exam anxiety in particular, seems to be getting harder and harder for a lot of folks. And this is not generational, it's not a Gen Z or a issue or a Gen Alpha issue at all. This is across the board. People seem to be having a lot of anxiety issues, and it's really heartening to hear that you had something on those lines, whatever, to whatever extent it might have been, but through hard work and really repeated practice and really focusing on the tests, you have done better and better. So that's really, really impressive. And I think, Anizu, you seem to have a very, very good plan about tackling, and you're very systematic and methodical about tackling these things. I mean, as people say that, even the ocean is made with a single, starts with a single drop of
Mhm.
water. So I think, and that's kind of the approach that you've taken, that no matter how big the material, you're going to take small baby steps, focus on that baby steps, build the foundations, and then keep going up and up and up.
do it.
And which is exactly what you've done. So now, speaking of, we talked about board exams and residencies. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what where your aspirations are?
Okay. So I really want to go into cardiology. However that may be, if it's, being an interventional cardiologist or a cardiothoracic surgeon, but anything to do with the heart is where I would like to be, mostly due to family experiences. So yeah, I lost my father. He had a heart attack. So now the cardiology thing is really like very personal for me. So I would really want to do that, in honor of him and to also help other people.
Okay. And do you have a plan? Do you know? So, since you are from Nigeria, do you want to go back to Nigeria? Do you want to stay in the United States? Do you want to stay in the Caribbean? Do you want to go the United Kingdom? Do you have any? Have you thought about this? How have you laid this out in your mind?
For training purposes, I would prefer to be trained in the United States and
Mm-hmm.
just, possibly practice there and also, go home for more pro bono work because that
I
would
got it.
be the best route for me.
Okay. So, our clinical dean, who's an alum from St. James, Dr. Gujarati, he's an internal medicine. So most of our students do get into internal medicine, and I think that that's the typical pathway to become a cardiologist. So at some point, I would highly recommend reaching out to. We have over 800 graduates practicing medicine across the United States and Canada. Reaching out to them, as many of them as you can, talk to them about the pathway, and I genuinely think that that'll open some doors for you. But I do think that that's a very noble aspiration. And in fact, once you come to the United States, I will introduce you to some of our clinical faculty who have done exactly what you just said. They've come from different parts of the world. They have practiced in the United States. They're making good money, and what they're doing is they're giving back by starting up not for profits in their local regions, whether it's Africa, whether it's South Asia, whether it's some of them even, one of our board members went back to rural America and started setting up practices there and just giving back. And I think that that is truly the thing that sets students from St. James apart from the rest of the students who, and I'm going to be honest, a lot of students, especially the newer group of students that are coming into medicine, really want to do this for the money, because apparently it's, for them, it's a quote unquote easy way to make like a huge salary, which,
It's not the easy
and I
way.
think and that's what I keep telling them. I mean, this is not an easy way. Um, but a lot of people don't see that. A lot of people will watch a couple of movies, TV shows, maybe a couple of personalities on television, and are like, oh, you know what? That sounds great. I'm just going to do it, without much thought to it. But I think what you've done is, obviously you've thought about this. You've planned it out, and the way you're tackling everything, I can almost guarantee, and I'm no soothsayer and I'm no clairvoyant, but I can tell you that you have an exceptionally bright future, just because of the way you're approaching the methodical and systematic approach of taking huge portions of a curriculum and breaking it down and mastering it.
Thank you.
So thank you for being so methodical about this, and thank you for being a tutor where you're passing this information and this knowledge on. Because I'm going to be very honest with you, in a lot of the conferences that I go to, a lot of the educators say the same thing, that especially with the changing times, with how we ingest information, where everything is 30 seconds, that that expectation that I'm going to be able to watch a 30-second video and become a cardiothoracic surgeon, that expectation is not the reality, obviously. And a lot of discussion among within academia is they think that students need to readjust their thinking to be able to focus better and essentially set their expectations right. Because studying medicine, as you pointed out, with the amount of hours that you're putting in with tutoring and classes and studying afterwards, it's not a 30-second video. It's not watching a couple of Instagram threads. This is hard work, and it takes a lot of energy. And you have really gotten it down to a science, and you're really encouraging other students that you're tutoring to follow the same. So thank you so much for that. And I'm sure all the students that you're helping out really appreciate that a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anazuo, for giving us such an insightful view into the day in the life of a student at St. James. And what's particularly heartening is that you really don't seem to be afraid or fearful or apprehensive of the coursework and course material, and you really break it down into small pieces, master those small pieces, and keep building on it. And I think that truly is the secret to success. But thank you so much for providing us that glimpse into how to prepare and how to study for medicine. If you liked the content that we shared today, please do not forget to give us a like and a follow. It goes a long way for us. And if you are interested in more content, please feel free to download more episodes of Med School Minutes from any of your favorite podcast platforms. And remember, before signing off, there's no shortcut to being an MD.
Thank you so much for tuning into our show. We hope you enjoyed another episode of Med School Minutes. If you like our content, please follow us and receive notification when a new show is posted. This podcast is brought to you by St. James School of Medicine. For a video version of this podcast, please check us out on sjsm.org/video.